Hi, this is Klue IQ Chronicles, Crime Code and Clues. With me, Alexandra Kitty. So welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something that's been keeping a lot of people up at night, AI, but not in the way you think. AI isn't here to steal jobs. It's here to do something far more devastating. It's here to call bullshit on a lie that's been packaged and sold for centuries. That lie? That creativity is a blessing, that talent is magic, that some people are just special. The truth? Talent is hard work. It's focus, practice, feedback, perseverance, and the willingness to iterate until you get it right. And AI is exposing everyone who forgot that, especially the ones who bought into their own narcissistic mythology. So what is AI actually doing to creative industries? Well, there's a scale of disruption, obviously. Generative AI tools have exploded into the mainstream. Chat GPT, Midjourney, music generators, all that. And research shows that AI could automate up to over a quarter of tasks in art, design, entertainment, and media sectors. This isn't hypothetical anymore. It's happening right now in music studios, design agencies, writing workshops, film, VFX departments, gaming, you name it. So it's here. But what is AI actually doing? It's not replacing creativity. It's automating the repeatable, pattern-based grunt work that was always hidden behind the curtain of genius. That work, composition, color grading, copy variation, storyboarding, roughing out ideas, is where most of the creative labor actually lives. So once a machine can do competently what took humans months of skill building and repetition, the public is forced to ask how much of what I admired was actually singular genius and how much was delegation. So why is AI a humbler? For centuries, creative fields built a mythology. You're either born with the gift or you're not. AI collapses that distance by showing in real time that the work these geniuses did was largely process-driven and reproducible. The artists, musicians, and writers who claim to be devastated by this aren't actually devastated by the technology. They're devastated by the exposure. So AI isn't humbling you because it's replacing you. It's humbling you because it's doing openly what you paid people to do in secret. So I used to teach art. I taught kintsugi, but I also taught general art lessons at art schools and at colleges, from metalworking to sculpting to what have you. And I remember I taught one summer class. It was a summer art camp at Niagara College. And there was this young girl who was considered very gifted. She could reproduce a lot of things. What she lacked was actual creativity. So if it was something artistic that she didn't know, she wouldn't even try. So I gave students epoxy to mold so that it would dry right away and it would have a sculpture. Well, she wasn't into sculpting. She let hers dry out because this was not something she knew. Her parents thought of her as creative genius. What she was a really good mimic. And that took lots of practice. So she would sit and draw and draw and draw. She had the perseverance to do it, but she didn't have the creativity, and yet we would not distinguish this. And this was a problem. She wouldn't pick up something new because she didn't have any model to mimic. So she didn't have something to mimic. She was useless. And this is something we often forget, that what we consider genius is actually mythology, and it's a mask. So how did creative genius become a myth? Who built it and why? Before the Enlightenment, genius wasn't a personal attribute. It was considered a supernatural force that gave people ideas. So totally people did not think they were capable of doing it. It was some deity or deities, some force. So in the 16th century, Giorgio Vasari said Michelangelo was sent to earth by the great ruler of heaven. Never mind, he had to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. By the 18th century, copyright law and humanism reframed the artist as the sole owner and creator of ideas. So think about this. Why we were able to have copyright laws? Because no longer was this considered defect. So if it's defect, you can't own it. It's not yours. So you're just a vessel. You're an exploitable unit to harvest. Copyright shifted the center of gravity. By 1711, Joseph Addison called Shakespeare a natural genius. It was the first modern use of the term. So this is where we talk about elevation and exceptionalism. The shift was deliberate. It was profitable to sell one iconic figure than to acknowledge distributed labor. So what most people do not understand, I'm in the creative fields, and I can tell you as somebody who does all my work, I don't have a team. There is no team. The team is me and Perplexity. It's the team. AI has allowed me to delegate because for years and years and years, people go, well, I'm not a numbers changer, but that's because I don't delegate. I do the writing, I do the research, I do the heavy lifting myself. With Klue IQ, I do all the coding. I don't have time to schmooze. I don't have time to market. So you either do things creatively, which takes a lot of work, but a lot of people we consider creative geniuses are not. They're just good at marketing and stealing other people's ideas. So gatekeepers built the brand. Publicists and brand, before I continue, branding is a military term. It is to have a facade so that people don't question what's going on behind the scenes. That's what branding is. It's not a corporate term. It's a military term. That's your brand. It is a form of deception. When people talk about branding, they don't actually understand what they're saying. It's how do I have this mask that makes me look more competent than I am, that makes me look more benevolent than I am. So publicists, labels, studios, and galleries deliberately manufacture narratives around artists, origin stories, eccentricity, tortured genius myths. So when we think about Lana Turner being discovered, in a diner, that's a myth. So a lot of things that you parrot from a press release. Well, this actor, just stumbled upon this one day. No, they didn't. Probably their parents were friends, or they were lawyers or something, or they knew somebody in a business, and that's what got their kid in. Or they used the casting couch or something else. If we talked about what was true, it would sound you go, oh, okay, no wonder. That's not special. Like if your mom owns the studio, of course. But if we have, okay, he slept in his car and he was, had to struggle. Ooh, that's a story. That's a myth. That's all it is. Hollywood was built on myth. It's a role. Actors are always in a role. It doesn't matter if they're endorsing a product, endorsing a political party, endorsing themselves, or are in front of a camera. It's a role. And why? Because hero worship sells tickets, albums, and art. Because what we have in modern era is a fantasy stand-in. So an actor or a singer on stage represents a prefabricated fantasy. It's a sanctioned fantasy. So when we think of rebels, we might think of somebody in a leather jacket swearing on stage. That's a sanctioned rebel. See a real life rebel fight for something, the counterinsurgency manual's whipped out and we try to get rid of that real rebel. But we can have a fantasy one. And there's a whole team behind this fantasy. So personality cults are more profitable than acknowledging that this is a team, that this is a firm, that this is a factory. I mean, all you have to do is look at, for instance, the credits of any film, and you'll see there is literally hundreds of people, or even with video games, hundreds of people working on a single project. But then we have the one face, we put a face on it, and that's the genius. Never mind that this genius might do little to nothing. So there's a hidden infrastructure. So ghost artists and studio assistants have always done significant portions of famous works. Renaissance apprentices worked on masterpieces, yet the credit went to one name. And that one name might have done almost nothing. They knew how to delegate and then take the credit. We had Thomas Edison is a perfect example, not in entertainment, but people thought he was a genius inventor. He wasn't a genius inventor. He had people invent stuff and he took credit for it. So, and these days, the contemporary examples I can use, they're brazen. Jeff Koons operates a studio of 150 plus assistants. Former assistants describe the work as paint by numbers. Damien Hirst only painted about 25 out of his 1,400 spot paintings himself. The rest was his team. Takashi Murakami runs a factory-style operation where assistants work around the clock to meet brand demand. We have other ones. I'd say source much of their work to studios. Sometimes a Beijing studio, they do it in China, but they keep the exact roles of assistants secret. Salvador Dali pre-signed canvases and then had other people paint his works. Even the Monkees, famous example, had the Wrecking Crew and a whole team of songwriters, producers work behind the scenes. So it's not just one person. There's a whole team behind this person, each person doing a little here and a little there. Sure, they look polished because they just have to show up. A lot of times you have books that are supposedly written by a single person. But what you don't know, there's a whole factory of people. There's a group of people who write just the outlines. They don't do anything else. That's their job. So if you read this group, they have a ghostwriter write this in the person's name. And then the person just actually runs this as a company. You go, I like this so-and-so author. No, you don't. You don't know if that actual author wrote a word. They might have even done the first book, or they stole the idea from somebody else, but they do not actually write. Very few mainstream authors write their own work. There's a whole team behind it. There's no transparency. There's no legal obligation to have transparency. And there's our first problem. People feel bad because they're not as polished. That's because you don't have photographers worrying about the lighting, doing the airbrushing, all sorts of stuff. They have a whole team. They have publicists. They have lawyers. They have business managers. They have assistants. They have production managers. They have all a team. And it's very easy to look polished when you have a whole team. And sometimes it's literally hundreds of people. Of course that person's going to look good. Songwriters, ghostwriters write entire songs that famous artists take sole credit for. Max Martin has shaped the careers of Britney Spears, Katy Perry, and Taylor Swift, largely invisible. Coaches, editors, and shadow collaborators are routine in publishing music and film. All of this happens under non-disclosure agreements, so the public never knows. So this is a really good actor, so-and-so. They can do accents. That's because they have somebody teaching them to perform the accent. They will have even AI tweak it if it does, or somebody dub their voice if it's not done perfectly. They have people teaching them how to move, how to walk. It's not just how to act. There's a whole, even in plays, you have dramaturgy. You have somebody tell the director how to interpret a play. So you have this whole behind the scenes machine. But you don't see that. And you think it's just this one genius. It's not a genius. It's a bunch of hardworking people working from the shadows who are censored by their contracts from telling you what they do. It's a persona. These creatives learn to mask failure, hide their practice, and erase their collaborators. They cultivated signature looks, such as Steve Jobs and his turtlenecks, David Foster Wallace's bandanas, to cement the myth. Some, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, literally lied about their process, claiming he could write short stories in a day when it actually took months. Why? Because the myth sells better than the truth. The creative genius you've admired wasn't a person. It was a brand managed by an entire industry of gatekeepers and paid by audiences willing to buy the bullshit. The problem is now, these people bought their own hype. So what happens when the mask becomes the person? They internalize the myth. These creatives didn't just perform genius for audiences. They internalized the narrative. They got into role. It's like method acting. To get into that role, they immerse themselves in it. But there's no off button. It's like an undercover police officer, and I've written about them and I've studied. And this is something they do. They get into this role, and then they can't get out of this role because once you get into this wavelength, with this immersion, it's very hard to come up for air. And this is what happens. They started believing their own mythology, treating feedback as irrelevant or worse, insulting. Psychology research on ego and self-mytholized shows that how easy it is for successful people to become blind to their limits. Once praise and narrative harden into the identity. Once it's baked, once the narcissism has been rewarded enough times, people become addicted. It's worse than crack cocaine. The persona is addictive. So once you convinced yourself that you're special, you stop listening to critical feedback. The feedback loop becomes closed. People they have not thin skin, they have no skin. They can't stand it because to question it, the whole house of cards collapses. Sycophants surround famous creatives. People tell them they're geniuses. Their team is hired to execute their vision without question. And the result? No one tells them when they're wrong. No one says, try it a different way, or, you've done this now for 20 years. New generation doesn't care. You're a legacy. They double down because they got rewarded too many times. The very practice, the iteration, the refinement, the willingness to fail that made them good in the first place stops happening. They become stagnant. And the lie becomes fragile. So this worked as long as the infrastructure stayed hidden. So assistants were bound by NDAs. Ghostwriters were paid to disappear. The narrative was tightly controlled. But AI doesn't care about the mythology. It just does the work publicly without the hero worship. Suddenly, the creative who never revises sees a machine output a first draft. The musician who composes intuitively sees a model generate variations in seconds. Their response? Panic, anger, claims of theft, anything but honest reckoning of what was always true. So they get entrapped by their own persona. These people are trapped by their own mythology. If they admit AI is useful, they're admitting their natural genius might have been a process and technique all along. If they admit they use ghostwriters and teams, they decimate their personal brand. So they attack AI instead, defending a fiction that is now indefensible. The saddest part? These creatives are being humbled not by AI, but by finally being forced to see themselves as they actually are. And there's another problem with creatives. This is a big problem. Someone like me who has STEM and artistic backgrounds and education, this is very easy for me to see. I have a balance, but a lot of creatives are totally averse to STEM education. It's become their blind spot. And ignoring systems and technology became a strategic mistake. It's a false divide. So for decades, creative fields treated STEM as the enemy, or at least irrelevant. Artists, writers, and musicians were encouraged to think of themselves as intuitive, spiritual, non-technical. The educational system reinforced this. You were either a creative person or a technical person. Heaven forbid that you have more than one talent, or you have to practice in more than one discipline. This was always a lie, but it was a profitable lie for institutions that could sort and silo students. So it was gatekeeping. You can wear this mask, you can wear that mask. Having both masks, well, you might get too full of yourself. We can't control you. We don't know which lane you're going to go in. If we put you in a single lane, you're easier to manipulate and control. So hybrid careers, anyway, came out and it proved it wrong. So game design required both art and code. UX and interface design required both aesthetics and systems thinking. Scientific animation required both visual storytelling and deep technical literacy. Robotics design required both form and function. And even we can talk about artists who do recreations of deceased people, of skeletal remains. They have to create a face. That's both art and science. So every single one of these fields prove that real leverage lives at the intersection of both art and technology. What changed? For the last 2 decades, the market has been signaling creative people who understand systems win. Data visualization, motion graphics, interactive design, game narrative, all of these require craft plus literacy in how systems work. The creatives who survived and thrived in the 2010s were the ones who learned code, understood data, or picked up technical skills. So the current crisis is this. Creatives who ignored STEM and systems thinking are now confronting AI from a position of weakness. They don't understand how these models work, what they're trained on, how to use them strategically, or how to audit them. They are AI illiterate. They have never read a single academic journal or scientific article on it. They wouldn't know the terminology. They don't have any understanding of a scientific method. So they can't vet and verify which studies are good and which are mediocre and which are bad. They have no understanding. They don't understand the jargon. They don't understand the process. The asymmetry is total. Some are operating the tool. Others are being operated on by it. So current hiring and educational trends explicitly see creative people who can design with code, understand data pipelines, and work with systems. It takes practice. It takes perseverance. There's no genius here either. You have to sit and work. The market is saying pure creativity without literacy in how systems work is now a liability. What that means is our brain fragmentation, where we either go primal, emotional, or analytical, is no longer viable, and it never should have been. Your brain is supposed to use all 3 core literacies together to talk about, we can talk about radial literacy, where your whole brain is harmonized. And I have written extensively on this. So this isn't new. The market has been saying this for 10 years, but only now, with AI disruption visible and urgent, is anyone actually finally paying attention. So AI harmonizes the brain. It forces primal literacy, it forces emotional literacy, and it forces analytical literacy at once. You can't use 1/3 of your brain and think that you are superior to people who might use a different third, or people, particularly not people who use all three. So STEM isn't the enemy of creativity. It's the operating system. If you don't understand it, you can't control anything. So talent is focus, practice, feedback, and iteration. What talent actually is and always was. So let's deconstruct it. Talent isn't an anointed status. It's a set of observable, repeatable behaviors. Research on creative excellence consistently points to the same traits: focus, the ability to direct attention and ignore distraction; practice, deliberate, structured designed to improve specific skills, which means perseverance; feedback, the willingness to hear criticism and incorporate it quickly; and iteration, the capacity to refactor and rethink approach when something isn't working. So what does AI reveal? Once a machine can do the genre of work that took humans months to learn, it exposes how much of professional output sits on repeatable structures. The structures themselves aren't magical. They're learnable, they're reproducible. That talented person is the one who understands the structure well enough to master it, and then had the courage to break it and invent something new. So the real differentiator is critical thinking. So research on AI adoption in creative industries identifies the key surviving skill: critical thinking, not inspiration, not mystique, not blessing. Critical thinking, managing ideas, collaborating with intelligent systems. In other words, can you see what a machine produced and asked, is this right? Can it be better? What's it missing? So AI is an invitation to drop the mythology and get serious about craft. It's an invitation to treat creative work as an experimental pipeline you constantly tune, not as a performance of giftedness. The creatives thriving in an AI world are the ones who understand their tools, so that's technical literacy, practice deliberately and accept feedback, growth mindset, treat their work as a system to be optimized, not as proof of personal worth, and see failure as data or feedback, not as humiliation. Talent was never magic. It was always work. It just looked better when the work was hidden. So what do you actually do with this information? For creatives in denial, you can keep defending the mythology. It won't help you. You can keep pretending AI is a threat. It's not. Your inability to understand and direct it is the threat. Or you can do what the best creatives have always done. You can learn, adapt, and use every new tool to extend what's possible. So the bus is leaving. You can get on it or spend the next decade running behind it obsolete. So for creatives who want to thrive, stop treating STEM as optional. Learn enough about systems, data, and code to have opinions, intelligent opinions about how tools work. And you have to keep updating. It's not like something you learned 5 years ago and it still applies. Reading academic journals should be something you do, I don't saying every day, but you should pick 5 a month and read it. It's better than watching, some throwaway stuff on TikTok. Get informed. It's not difficult. Once you understand it, you can it just removes the myth and the fear. So treat AI as a collaborator, not an enemy. Experiment with it. Find out what's it's bad at. Find the edges where the human creativity is still essential. And stop hiding your process. Talk about failure, iteration, and the messy reality of how things get made. That honesty is rarer and more valuable than mythology. And this is why I do Klue IQ Chronicles. I talk about, and why I do my blog, this and the development book. I see what worked, what doesn't. I'm not perfect. I don't want to be. I'm not in competition with any deity. So double down on what machines can't do: judgment, taste, the ability to ask, is this worth making? For everyone else, stop worshiping the persona. The genius myth was always a marketing scheme. Respect the work instead. Understand that great creative output is the result of focus, practice, feedback loops, and usually a lot of invisible collaboration. Support the creatives who are honest about the process. Reward transparency. Punish gatekeeping. demand that creatives understand their tools. If someone claims to be a creative professional but doesn't understand the systems they work with, that's not artistry, that's negligence. AI didn't disrupt creativity, it disrupted the lie. What happens next depends entirely on whether you're willing to stop performing and start building. Now, before we go, I have decided we're going to have a new little section in here, a Q&A with AI. I will ask the AI questions and it will give me answer. I'm about to ask Perplex some questions. So, Plex, how does AI expose the myth of talent in creative work?
AI exposes the myth of talent by showing creativity isn't magic, it's process, practice, and technical skill. Anyone can produce more by learning to use AI, but only those who adapt and improve with it stand out.
In what ways did ignoring STEM hurt creatives?
Ignoring STEM left creatives without skills to understand or leverage new tools like AI, putting them at a disadvantage as technology reshaped their fields. Those with STEM backgrounds adapt faster and get better results with AI.
How does AI reward practice, feedback, and technical skill?
AI rewards those who experiment, refine, and learn its tools. The more practice and technical skill you have, the better your creative output and impact will be. Feedback and adaptation let creators stand out in an AI-driven world.
Who adopts best to AI in creative industries?
People who are curious, open to learning, and willing to combine technical skills with creativity adapt best to AI in creative industries. Lifelong learners outpace those who rely only on inspiration or old methods.
Finally, can you give examples of creative jobs changed by AI?
Yes, AI has changed illustration, graphic design, copywriting, video editing, music production, and animation. Automation handles routine tasks, while creators focus on high-level ideas and direction.
Thank you so much for your input. Much appreciated.
You're very welcome. Glad to help. Let me know if you need anything else for your podcast or projects.
So this is Klue IQ Chronicles. I'm Alexandra Kitty. AI is this century's great humbler. It's not here to make things worse. It's here to strip away the theater, expose the machinery, and force us all to get serious about what creativity actually means. The creatives who thrive will be the ones who loved the work more than they loved the mythology, who are willing to learn, iterate, fail, and build something new. Those are the people who will thrive. If that's you, welcome. We've got work to do. So thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay curious, stay critical. And if you hear someone claiming they're a natural genius with no practice, coaching, and no collaborators, you know what to do. See you next time. Ta-ta for now.